Hey everyone, and welcome back to Throwback Terror, the series where I revisit the horror and thriller classics that shaped the genre and shaped us. Now, this isn't about cheap scares or shock value. Throwback Terror is about the films that ask dangerous questions, the ones that made us uncomfortable, lingered in our thoughts, and maybe even rewired how we think about fear. For today's film, it was one of my early favorites, a movie that really stuck with me when I first saw it and still does years later. I'm talking about Flatliners. At first glance, Flatliners doesn't always get labeled as a horror. It's often described as a thriller or sci-fi drama. And sure, it has elements of both. But make no mistake, Flatliners is horror. Not because of jump scares or monsters, but because it taps into some of our most primal fears. Fear of death, fear of consequences, fear that some doors, once opened, can't be closed again. This is horror rooted in psychology and morality. The terror doesn't come from what chases you. It comes from what waits for you after you make a choice. At the core of Flatliners is curiosity. The belief that knowledge is worth any risk. These characters don't stumble into danger, they choose it. They intentionally stop their hearts, flirt with death, and convince themselves they're in control. And that's where the horror begins. Because horror loves hubris. Horror thrives when characters believe they're smarter than the rules, stronger than consequences, or special enough to escape punishment. Flatliners is very clear. Curiosity without humility comes at a cost. What makes Flatliners especially effective is that the antagonists aren't demons or supernatural entities in the traditional sense. They're guilt. Each character is haunted by manifestations of their past mistakes, things they've buried, justified, or ignored. Death doesn't introduce something new. It brings back what was already there. That's what makes this movie so unsettling. You can't fight guilt. You can't outrun it. You can only confront it or let it destroy you. Visually, Flatliners feels like it exists between worlds. The lighting is dark and clinical. The dream sequences are surreal and disorienting. There's this constant sense that the characters are hovering between life and death, never fully grounded in either. That liminal quality is where the film really shines. You've never allowed to feel comfortable. Even the quiet moments feel like off, like something is waiting just outside the frame. The movie understands that atmosphere is the scare. And yes, we need to talk about the cast, specifically one of my favorites, Kevin Bacon. Now, I'll fully admit this part. Part of why Flatliners became one of my early favorites is because I've always loved Kevin Bacon. I just have. He brings such a grounded human presence to everything he's in. And in a movie that deals with heightened concepts like death and the afterlife, that grounding matters. Kevin Bacon makes the fear real. He doesn't play the idea of terror. He plays the emotional fallout of it. And honestly, I think we could always use more Kevin Bacon in horror. Actually, we could use more Kevin Bacon in general. Even decades later, Flatliners still works because the question it asks haven't gone away. What happens after we die? Can we outrun guilt? Are there lines humanity shouldn't cross, even in the name of discovery? The movie may look like a product of its time stylistically, but thematically, it is timeless. In an age obsessed with pushing boundaries and chasing answers, Flatliners feels more relevant than ever. If you're a fan of psychological horror that asks dangerous questions instead of offering easy answers, Flatliners is absolutely worth revisiting. Now, if you enjoyed this episode of Throwback Terror, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss future deep dives. And if you're a writer, especially one interested in horror, tension, or psychological storytelling, you can find tips, advice, and craft breakdowns on my Substack. You can find the link in my bio. So until next time, don't cross the line.